All right, NAI football fans, this is Corey Thorpe back with another edition of the NAIAF Ball Live Show, powered by AdCraft Custom Apparel and Merch, the best in the business since 1974. And Angelo, I don't know if you got to see their fantastic April Fool's Day uh, deal today, but they were proud to pronounce their very first video game called Screen Printer 2025. You can become a screen printing master.
With all the April Fool's stuff that's going on, surprisingly enough, at least from where we are here in the office, this is only the second April Fool's thing that I've heard of. You would think there would be a whole lot more that's been going on around, at least in our realm. But yeah, no, I think it's also like another underestimated day too. Like you would think there would be more jokes that would be lined around today. And again, I haven't really had an opportunity to see too much of what's been going on with social media and all involved, but this is the opportunity to get a lot of people spinning their heads on certain announcements, and they totally forget what day it is today when they do it. And it's funny because you see that every single year where it's the same thing where they're all like, "What is this crazy announcement?" And then only what 10% of people pick up as like, "Oh, it's April 1st today." Makes sense.
To me, April Fools died when Google stopped doing April Fools jokes. Google had the best ones. But we did have a guy in the office today who announced that he had crumble cookies, and I bet there was a veggie tray inside.
That's no bueno. Oh man. Yeah, crumble cookies myself. Funny enough, I only heard about crumble cookie when I was at St. Leo just last year.
What?
So, in terms of all the madness that goes on, I mean, I still can never understand. You pay $5 for a cookie, like it's got to be the cookie of life if that's going
Okay.
to be the how you do it.
It's hot, it's warm, and it's massive.
I mean, yeah, no, I mean, you can never joke with their sizes. I mean, the cookies are as big as the ones you could get them in Texas. But to be fair as well, they usually like a lot of variety too. There's always a different menu every week, with the exception of chocolate chip. But,
Right. I mean,
always exciting flavors to try. And I know for me, I always get a sweet tooth every now and then and have to try out what their latest flavor is. And they usually come through. They hit home runs with that stuff.
well, Angelo, we had a game that was a home run this week. It was a good one. It was a nail biter. I was waiting on an interview with a coach. Uh, Podcast drops tomorrow with that one, and he was running a little bit late. And I'm telling him it's fine. I am watching an instant classic game between Kansas Wesleyan and Ottawa, and lo and behold, the Coyotes get their first win over Ottawa in program history. They were 0 for 12 prior to the win. I'm going to tell you, the statistics might not look like it from here, but the Kansas Wesleyan defense came to play.
They did come to play, Corey, but they also had to be very meticulous as well. As you notice, if you look even deeper in the box score, just take a look at how long Kansas Wesleyan possessed the ball. We're talking 8-minute drives, 10-minute drives. I mean, the entire fourth quarter, the Coyotes handed the ball to themselves, and you had Ottawa that only had, what, one opportunity, and that was to try to go for the go ahead win in the final seconds. I mean, this was a game where after 12 times, you would think for the Coyotes, it's what are we going to do to try to stop the Braves? The Braves have been on a little bit of a slump so far, but at the same time, it's how can we methodically find a way to control the game? And you see this in flag football all the time. If there's a team that's dominating on offense, the main thing that coaches will do is what can we do to try to hang on to the ball, keep things short, and get chunk yardage along the way and see how long we can make the drive. You think about, and I know call it bias or whatnot, but you even think about Thomas and Kaiser when they first met and how long the Nighthawks held the ball, especially in that fourth quarter, and how head coach Chelsea Palmer likes to run the ball and try to milk as much clock as possible.
Drives
This is
me
what Kansas
crazy.
Wesleyan was doing the entire game. So if it works, it's part of the game plan. That limits the Braves in terms of what they can or can't do. But personally, looking at that game, I know I mentioned last week that Ottawa should have easily rolled to 13-3, but I think with this game, I was a little bit surprised in terms of the play and the quality, because I felt like Ottawa could have done better, with the limited opportunities that they did have, but they're still trying to figure things out offensively. And now that you've dropped your fourth game of the season, now this should be a real reflecting moment for Ottawa, because for the first time ever, they are no longer atop of the KCAC. And this is very new territory for them. And they got to figure out what they're going to do for the rest of the season and act fast.
Yeah, first loss in program history in the KCAC. Couple of stats that jump out at me. Ottawa, 4 penalties for 31 yards as compared to Kansas Wesleyan's 2 penalties for 16 yards. No, 4 penalties is not a lot, but it seemed like every single dad blast in one of them was in a key situation. And that's just, you can't do that. And then third down conversions, they were 6 of 10 on third down conversions, but they were 0 for 3 on fourth down conversions. It's not like this is conventional football where fourth down conversions are rare. They're pretty commonplace. And to not be able to get that fourth down conversion rate up a little bit, that killed you right there for Ottawa. And then, the penalties, not being able to get your defense off the field. Otherwise, it's a good game. Carrera doesn't throw a pick. She's 34 of 42 for almost 250. It's a good game for Ottawa, but Kansas Wesleyan was out for blood.
Yeah, and sometimes when you're motivated the right way, I mean, you think about the past games that they've had and how close they've gotten, and the closest they've been is probably to a 2-score difference. But sometimes it's the right atmosphere. You're at home, you set the tone early on, you let them know who's in charge of their own set field, and you go out there and you find a way to win. And I mean, for Kansas Wesleyan, again, like you mentioned, Corey, you look at the box score and it doesn't seem like Ottawa struggled offensively. But again, that's limited chances in terms of the possession side of things and how Kansas Wesleyan was able to control as much clock as possible. Just going through Ottawa's possessions real quick, Corey, they only had a total of 7 possessions the entire game. When's the last time you heard of Ottawa having single digits when it comes to 4 quarters of play and it comes down to how many ever time they get the ball? I mean, like, this was a game that was dominantly controlled by the Coyotes in terms of clock management. And I can't stress that enough, because these are the kind of strategies you see from teams to take down powerhouse teams and limiting their opportunities. And you look at how they did it too, is they didn't do anything fancy. And mind you would think that they ran the ball a lot, but most of their opportunities that they got was primarily through the air. I mean, again, Iwata threw it 46 times, over 300 yards. I mean, for a team that was controlling the clock for most of the time, that's what you get from chunking it down 10, 15 yards at a time. And granted, for Iwata, she's still finding her realm of things. But again, as we knew, she is rapidly rising in terms of that peak ability, in terms of what she can do for Kansas Wesleyan, and it's only going to get better for her.
And you can't forget the duo of Whitfield and Roman, 20 catches between the two of them. So 2/3 of Iwata's completions, and then 183 yards between them, which is well over half of Iwata's yardage total. Ottawa just didn't have an answer for Kansas Wesleyan, especially those 2 wide receivers. They were getting them schemed open, and I mean, 11 for 121, that's more than 10 yards a pop. Roman, the possession receiver, you're looking at, what is that, 6-ish yards a pop, 9 times 6 is 54. Yeah.
Roughly, I would say.
Yeah, 6.5 yards a pop. So nothing that's
almost even 7 if you think about 9 receptions, 62. If you're doing the math, you're knocking on 7 yards a reception.
Yeah, so because that 63 would be 7. So not enough to move the sticks, but enough to stay with the sticks. So it wasn't anything overwhelming. I Yeah, and I bet if I asked the Sauer sisters, they would say that the defense did let them down and did not get Kansas Wesleyan off the field.
Despite that, though, Corey, one shout out you do have to give to Ottawa is Jucani Washington in her
Oh, good
return
grief!
game was able to get 11 flag pulls and I believe an interception in the
Yep.
process. So, you know, despite the defensive efforts, I mean, you can tell that Washington was ready to go and she tried to do what she could from a defensive end of things. But at the same time, as you and I both know, partner, it's not just about one player, it's about an entire team effort. But at the same time, it's trying to figure out what's going to be best and how the whole defense can find that cohesion piece. And it seemed like for Washington, though, she was doing what she could to hold up that defense last week.
So then, how does that affect our top six? Will it be Ottawa dropping out for the first time and Lord knows when? How far does Kansas Wesleyan rise up? Well, I have to pump up the drama somehow because the poll doesn't actually give me that much to work with. Kansas Wesleyan and Ottawa flip flop. Words are hard. Had a couple of voters take weeks off this week, so that's why the numbers look a little odd on the first place votes. Kaiser still is basically first, except for one spot where they're second, and Warner is second place, all except for one spot where they're first. We still have a definite two tier. Kaiser Warner being two on the same tier, Thomas St. Thomas being same tier with each other, within a point of each other. And then you've got Kansas Wesleyan, who is, I believe, 7 points behind Thomas, and Ottawa, who is honestly barely hanging on to sixth at this point.
Yeah, Corey, the reason why they're hanging on to six, though, is it's a tough argument still. I mean, Baker, Midland, they're right up there. It's pretty much a cluster right now in the KCAC in that top reign. And the challenge with that is you still look at how those games are being played, and Ottawa still has a good hold on both Baker and Midland. So, as much as everything is right, they're literally close. I mean, this could be another poll that you could literally say all three teams are tied for six. But the only problem is Ottawa's beaten both teams so far. So it really doesn't give you that much of an
Right.
argument in terms of should they be able to crack in. But if we had a receiving votes poll, they would definitely both be in it. But you also look at Kansas Wesleyan at number 5. Even though they're 10-1 on the season, it's tough to argue them being any higher because again, you look at their schedule, you look at what they've done so far. They were not at the Reinhardt tournament. They really haven't played. I don't know if I want to say they haven't played quality competition because again, I mean, for what it's worth, again, you have Baker and you have Midland in the mix. But
And they lost
when
to
it comes to
Midland
the overall NAIA realm of things,
or Baker.
you still haven't played some conference opponents like Ottawa has. So it's still a little bit of a challenge in terms of trying to figure out how would they fare against those teams.
Right.
Again, St. Thomas, I believe they have a loss. Thomas has a couple of losses, and then of course Kaiser and Warner, still undefeated on the season. So, it really comes down to how they can fare out and play. But again, I know from my end, it was very tough because, I'll be honest here on the show. I had to battle it out for at least a good 15, 20 minutes. Like Kansas Wesleyan's now 10-1. They've just beaten Ottawa. Is that enough to overtake Thomas, let's say, for example? But the thing is, Thomas had a great weekend. Despite it being Reinhardt and Point, they still came out. They still did business. They if I did the quick math correctly, Corey, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think between those two games, Thomas went over triple digits.
Yep.
So offensively, things are rolling, and then defensively, they only allow one score. So I mean, to put Kansas Wesleyan above Thomas when Thomas did what they were supposed to do, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I mean, same thing with St. Thomas. They hard fought game against Weber International. Weber still considered a quality win. And to win 25-18 is they took care of business and they defeated another quality opponent. So, all in all, it's a challenge. And again, there's not always the luxury of playing every single team in NAIA. But again, for what it's worth, it is a little bit of a challenge. But I think from the rankings and what we're seeing, that's just about as good as you're going to be able to get it.
Yeah, and there are two teams that are receiving votes. So Ottawa's got 4 votes, hanging on to 6 with 4 points. There are 2 teams with a single point each, and that is Midland and Weber. So starting to see, maybe some cracks there. We'll see what Midland is able to do. We'll see what Weber is able to do coming up this week, as they've got a couple of chances to really show up and show out. So we'll take a quick break here, and we'll have a word from our friends at AdCraft.
So you want to create and sell custom merch for your team or business. That's exciting, but where do you begin? How much inventory should you order? How do you distribute orders? AdCraft has your answers. Streamline the way you offer custom merch by utilizing our risk-free web store service. We ship directly to each customer, and we have the fastest turnaround in the game. Raise funds for your team or get merch to your employees and patrons. Contact AdCraft today, and let's bring your merch to life.
That's exactly what they do, and when they're not, launching great April Fool's Day jokes, they do a fantastic job with their web stores, with their product. You should really go check them out. We talk about them week in, week out. They are the GOATs. So, I think this really sets up what we were talking about with the poll. Really sets up, there's really one huge game to watch for this week. And that's Kaiser St. Thomas playing in Miami Gardens at St. Thomas's Place. This is really the big one to watch this week. And, Kaiser cannot overlook St. Thomas, or St. Thomas will reach up and bite you.
Oh, no question about that. I mean, clearly this is a trap game by any means when you look at Kaiser's situation, because just like when Kaiser played Thomas and they couldn't get that holdover, and Kaiser has a hold over St. Thomas. I mean, when you look at that history, the overall series, this will be their 11th overall match combined, and St. Thomas has only won 2 out of those 10 games. But you look at the last time these two teams matched up, again, very close. St. Thomas is out for blood. As close as that game was, and St. Thomas having the 2-score lead in Atlanta last year, and seeing that basically fall apart as Kaiser came back and won that contest, the Bobcats are going to be in full force, and especially with it being at Miami Gardens, that's going to be quite a challenge for them. And the challenge with this in particular is, will St. Thomas have the offensive capabilities to overtake the Seahawks? As you and I both know, Corey, the key storyline here from a football standpoint will be St. Thomas's defense against that big time, words can't even describe it, but Kaiser's unlimited amount of weapons on offense and what they've been able to do. I mean, from St. Thomas's stout defense to what Kaiser can put up from an offensive standpoint, I mean, that's going to be the exciting piece. But then on the flip side, what do we see from St. Thomas? Do we see Holly Neer find her way against the Seahawks a little bit? Do we see Jada Graham become the ultimate weapon on offense? I mean, the sky's the limit, and there's so many questions to ask. But figuratively speaking, with this game, it's going to be something where it's going to be a battle for the ages.
And you think about it, like, Kaiser hasn't played Warner yet. Kaiser hasn't played St. Thomas. Kaiser has played Thomas. But you've got the 2 toughest matchups of the year that Kaiser has, I think, wisely tossed to the back half of the season. I don't think they knew it was a wise decision at the time, but I think that having to break in a new head coach, and letting your kids learn how she's going to coach is, I think this has turned out well for Kaiser.
Well, to be fair too, Corey, Coach Harris does know the system a little bit. She
Oh,
was
of course.
Justin Hilliker's assistant last year, and she was elevated to the interim spot. But to your point, though, yes, it is head coaching experience, and that's still a different dynamic compared to what an assistant coach deals with. But to that end, I mean, it's something where she understands the team, she coordinates with them, and even just seeing the pieces come together, she knows, what the Seahawks have. But at the same time, too, when you're trying to figure out game day plans and you're trying to figure out, what you're going to do to coordinate that against St. Thomas, and now from the head coach's position, there's a lot to think about. And again, just taking the last three contests alone, St. Thomas got back-to-back wins dating back to 2023. You look at that 20-7 win when they were in West Palm, and then in the Sun Conference semifinals, defeating the Seahawks 31-25, and then, like I mentioned before, holding a 2-touchdown lead in Atlanta over the Seahawks before they came back. I mean, yes, Kaiser historically has had a hold over St. Thomas, but as of recent, do we really see that being an accurate statement still? I think St. Thomas is starting to understand how to take on the Seahawks. So unless if Coach Harris has something up her sleeve or a special game plan for the Burgundy and Navy, I truly believe, Corey, and as you're mentioning, we're going to have quite a show on our hands, and it'll be an exciting game to watch.
I'm glad it's a Saturday game, honestly. I love a good businessman special, but there ain't nothing like a Saturday game of football. You can just sit back, have a beverage of your choice next to you in the old lazy boy recliner, and just watch a good football game. It doesn't matter whether it's spring or fall.
Oh, not at all. And I mean, it's again, you think about the weather over there, and I mean, the weather I would think would be at least just nice enough to where you're not getting burnt, because of course in Florida, by the time March hits, or especially mid-March when spring hits, there's nothing wrong with Miami Gardens saying, hey, we're going to shoot back up to 90, 95 degrees.
Yeah, baby.
But you think about the last 3 seasons for St. Thomas too, and how challenging it is to beat them at Auto Garden Nations Field, or sorry, Auto Nation Field for our Miami Gardens listeners. But at Auto Nation Field, Corey, since 2022, St. Thomas has only lost 3 times at home, averaging 1 loss every time. So, in addition to the vibe in the field that they got going on, I mean, again, it's difficult to win at that turf field that they play on. We've seen it. Again, Thomas has not won on that field yet. Anytime that they try to go out and win, or the other teams go out and try to win, it's always a challenge. It's always one of the biggest challenges out there. And I mean, look at Warner. Warner's been probably the only team that has blanked the Bobcats at home. So, I mean, like, looking at how Warner is this season, it should go to show you enough that it's not very easy to beat the Bobcats on their home turf. So, for Kaiser, as they've gone through so many challenges before, we'll have another big test ahead of them Saturday.
Other than that, we're really faced, for the most part, with matchups of the top and bottom. We did not actually mention in last week that there was a game, or 2 weeks ago, there was a game where Graceland took a 2-game lead over, or sorry, no, wait, that was, time is hard. But Campbellsville got a win over Milligan and stretched their lead in their quote-unquote independent league, and I keep track of that because I'm a nerd. Up to 2 games. You have Thomas going to play Campbellsville and Milligan. You've got Kansas Wesley and Baker Southwestern Cotty, Weber Reinhardt, Warner Life, Baker Bethel, Midland Southwestern, Kansas Wesleyan Graceland, Warner Milligan. Honestly, if you really love flag football, Saturday's going to be a great day for you because you're going to have flag football from 9 a.m. all the way to about 5:30. But otherwise, honestly, at this point, I am really seriously getting ready to turn the page into conference championship season and looking at clinching scenarios, honestly.
Well, speaking of clinching scenarios, Corey, at this point, I think after today is really where we're going to see from a Sun Conference standpoint, what it's really going to come down to. Because unless the Bobcats find a way to have that home field magic and they can stun the Seahawks, I mean, we're realistically looking at 2024 Sun Conference Championship either in Lake Wales or in West Palm Beach. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at the remaining schedule and what they have for Warner, and I mentioned this a few weeks back, because of their wins over St. Thomas and Thomas early on in the season, with the exception of maybe Weber, it's a cakewalk the rest of the way through.
Yep.
Like, Warner would have to try and lose those games. But then again, as soon as I say that, you look at last weekend, I thought Ottawa should have been able to handle Kansas Wesleyan, but then any given Saturday, any given Thursday comes around and teams take it for granted, and who knows? So, I mean, as much as on paper, Warner should be able to run the table in the Sun Conference, there's always the typical trap games or a little bit of hiccups here and there, and you just have to hold your breath if you're a Royal right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so basically what that comes down to is we will decide the Sun Conference champion effectively on April 18th when Warner plays host to Kaiser. If Kaiser doesn't trip up, if Warner doesn't trip up, they've got St. Thomas this week. Or sorry, no. Does Kaiser, and then Fort Lauderdale and Life in between them. Warner, the schedule between then and now is Life this week, Reinhardt this week, Milligan this week, Bryant and Stratton this week, Campbellsville this week, Weber next week, Campbellsville next week, Life next week, and then Kaiser. So they are jam-packing it in. And you might see a tired Royal squad playing host to Kaiser on what is Warner's last game of the season.
It is possible, and sometimes there is that fatigue, but then again, depending on how conditioned they are and how well prepared they are. I mean, Coach Mims has a certain schedule that he has in mind, and there's a reason why you see the schedule lined up the way they do. And just to clarify, when I mean run the table from Warner, I was more or less talking about the conference opponents.
Sure.
Non-conference opponents, you never know what to anticipate or you never know what to expect. But they might, depending on how the games go, this could be one of those games where they could be good enough to where some of these opponents, they end up starting their second stringers to give their starters a rest, because as many games as they play, again, Warner's got a deep bench this year. And as long as players are getting the reps that they need and just the experience, especially on the road like that, again, you're getting players like Shay Crooks and Anna Vincini and Vincentini and a few others, who have made plays for Warner, opportunities to rest, so that way you reserve them for the bigger games, such as Kaiser at the end of the season.
Now, on the KCAC side of things, it's going to be a little more interesting. Kansas Wesleyan controls their own destiny at this point. They have a half-game lead on Ottawa, or basically they own the tiebreaker, and they have a 2-game lead on Midland. And Baker. Here's the schedule for KW. Couple days, Wednesday at Baker. Saturday at Graceland. April 10th, Wednesday versus Midland, and then the last game of the regular season at Ottawa. That could, and between then and now, I'm going to have to brush up on KCAC tiebreaker rules, just in case.
It would really come down to, just spitballing this right now, and again, not knowing exactly how the KCAC does their flag football tiebreakers, but that game's at Ottawa. And call it me going out on the limb again, partner, but if Ottawa cannot beat Kansas Wesleyan at home, that probably will be a defining moment for the 2024 season for the Braves. And it'll really start putting a lot of doubt in people's minds about if the Braves are capable of repeating for a fourth straight year. And, I would imagine at some point there has to be some fire that gets fueled into Ottawa's system entirely. Nobody likes this. Nobody likes the system that they're going in right now. Nobody likes that slump that they're in. Yes, they've gotten a couple of wins and quite some nice wins too over Cotty and a few others. But for the games that matter for them, this is going to be something where with Kansas Wesleyan, they need to start building up towards that final game of the regular season so that way they can take care of business and not put themselves in a situation to where they don't end up dropping to the number 2 or number 3 seed in conference play. Again, lots of season left to be played, 3 weeks out, but they have to take care of business now and make sure that they're coming out for vengeance, because that's where they're at right now. Ottawa has pretty much used up a lot of mulligans this year, and there's really not a lot of room for them to make any more errors. They got to find a way to snap out of things quickly and find their fire again.
The good news for Ottawa is they only play 2 more games the rest of the season. They have a game on Saturday against St. Mary, and they have a game a week from that hosting K-Dub. If K-Dub loses, it's their second loss, and it doesn't matter what they did in that first game against Ottawa because that'll be their second loss, and assuming that Ottawa doesn't lose to St. Mary, that puts them a game clear of Kansas Wesleyan. Ottawa will take it. And they'll play host, quote unquote. I'm sure they're going to have the KCAC tournament at Arrowhead Stadium or wherever they do it. But basically, this sets up that rematch on April 13th as actually they're going to have it at the Paragon Star in Lee's Summit, Missouri. I just saw that is where it's scheduled for the KCAC championship. But if you're Kansas Wesleyan, if you want that 1 seed, you're going to have to beat Ottawa at Ottawa. You're going to have to do it twice because your early season loss against Baker that's going to hamper you now down the stretch.
And again, speaking of that lone loss, it'll be an opportunity for Kansas Wesleyan to redeem themselves this Wednesday when they have to go over to Salina. So, this is really going to come down to, even though what Kansas Wesleyan right now is in the driver's seat, they have an opportunity to finish strong. But again, you got to take it one game at a time. And for Ottawa's sake, it's just regrouping and just knowing that you have just the 2 games left. For Kansas Wesleyan, it's theirs to lose right now.
Yeah, it's nice to control your own destiny. Honestly, at this point, both Ottawa and Kansas Wesleyan control their own destiny. You just got to make destiny a reality. So that's what we've got. We'll keep updating you. We have heard a little bit of news on the national tournament front, based on kind of what we're piecing together. Angelo, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't know that all the NAIA teams are going to make the tournament this year.
Well, from what we've heard right now, from the sources that we've had, it seems like they're shooting for 11, possibly 12 teams in the NAIA realm. And then, of course, they're expecting 10 junior college teams to be the representatives for NJCAA. So you think about the teams that we do have right now, and based off the overall standings that we're seeing, it might just level itself out. So essentially of the 21, 22 NAIA teams that we have right now, and I'm just spitballing the number, but you look at the way that the teams are settling out overall right now, you might have a little bit of controversy in the middle of the pack, but as of now, it seems like it's clear cut. The teams that need to win games, they understand the situation that they're in right now. And for teams that have been scoring winning seasons so far, they might they may have already placed the shoe in for this tournament that's coming up. Again, expect to see, despite what's going on right now, Corey, expect to see K Dub in Ottawa back in the tournament in Atlanta. Expect to see St. Thomas, Kaiser, and Warner back in Atlanta as well. But we're looking probably more at teams like Weber International, possibly Milligan, even Southwestern as teams that could be on the bubble. But again, 3 weeks of flag football, lots of season left to be played. It's a fight to the finish, brother.
Oh, it definitely is, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I would put right now the gap, if it's an 11-team field, and we don't know the exact number. If it's an 11-team field, then Milligan is in, and Southwestern would be the first team out, just based on record. If it's a 10-team field, then Campbellsville is in, and Milligan is the first team out. I think that's a reasonable place there, 10-11, to cut it. Because you won't have, that 73-0 win that Thomas had a couple years ago against Milligan. But you'll just have, top tier matchups all the way, and that reduces the amount of play, and that reduces the amount of worry about shoving games and playing, 12, 14 hours worth of games each day.
Right, and at some point, I mean, everybody knew that NAIA flag was going to be growing rapidly, and it's only going to continue to rapidly grow. So you do have to make some hard cuts, and I think we're getting close to a point now where, when you're thinking about qualifications, even, you also think about NAIA flag as a whole. It's an emerging sport, but just wait till it becomes sanctioned by the NAIA. And from a conference standpoint, you'll have automatic qualifying bids for the KCAC, the Sun Conference. And who knows, Corey, you might even have more conferences willing to step up and sponsor it, so that way they at least have one team guaranteed that will be heading to the championship. So, the possibilities are endless right now, but from a playoff perspective, from postseason play, it's a challenge, because you're literally looking at the NAIA flag football finals as the college football playoff system, especially when you get down to those final teams. Is it about record? Is it about the quality of wins and plays? Is it about other factors that's just more convenient for certain teams? I mean, you can come up with so many different reasonings behind it, but at the end of the day, there's only a certain amount of teams that are able to make it to this tournament. And then again, if you have a team that for whatever reason has to back out, do you say next team in the pecking order move up, or like how would that work? And I mean, again, there's so many possibilities to think about. We need more clear cut things in terms of how the bracket format's going to play out.
Yeah, especially now as we're about a month out, I would expect to start seeing very concrete information coming out absolutely any day now. We'll let you know as soon as we know anything, as always. And the folks that help us do all of this are our patrons. They are the best. Month in, month out, their support is absolutely vital to what we do. And they are DSU Cone, Bob Boone, Roger Meyer, Jeremy Vobble, Shirley LaBella, Fred Christensen, Jerry Quickle, Ace Wellen, Barrett, Marty Seabolt, Nick Ryan, Hayden Ferrigno, Kyle Gregory, Tyler Pierce, Justin Hoffman, Steve Speakman, Brian Shake, Julian Shager, Nate Soapbeer, Stephen Cutler, Julie Lout, Tim Burrow, Dale Norton, Nathan Moore, Dylan Gonzalez, Ryan, Jason Crawford, Dustin Wilkie, Charles A. Flowers, Todd Nix, Sean Chamberlain, Debbie, Zach Lance, and Josue Trujillo. And that is Another week of the NAIF Ball Live Show. It's we're getting down to the nitty gritty and almost down to tournament season, and man, I'm ready for it.
It's that exciting time, man. I mean, once we hit the month of April, I mean, it's all systems go. And especially when you think about what's going to end up at the end of the month with a lot of conference tournaments and championships, and then just making last case arguments in terms of, hey, we should be one of the teams that gets the invite to Atlanta. I mean, we may see some more crazy upsets along the way, but we're in for an exciting finish, man.
Always. Well, until then, until next time, we will see y'all on the Twitter feed. All right, there we go.